reality of family life is a mixed bag, isn't it? On the one hand, every one of us come from a family. Families are the foundation of human society. And families are the place where we are most blessed. We receive graces in our families. We receive the greatest joys in our family. There are so many blessings in family life and the relationships that are there. But at the same time, it is in our families where many of us experience our greatest hurts. The greatest pains of our life take place in our families. How many times when I'm in a counseling situation or in confession, one of the most frequently mentioned things is struggles that people have with their family. With a brokenness in relationship, with kids who have gone astray, with parents who don't understand, with spouses who don't communicate or love as they should, for disease and heartbreak, for addiction and violence, all of these things that take place in families. And it brings great pain and great hurt. And so today, we are given the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph to give us a sort of light, a sort of star, to guide us on our way. What are we supposed to do with these families that are on the one hand, great joys and blessing, and on the other hand, great trial and great struggle? Because we see all around in society kids who are in therapy because their parents messed them up, and parents who are grieving over the dumb decisions their kids have made, and all of the other stuff that happens in families. And yet, it's in these situations where there can be great blessing. When, like Joseph, we hear the word of God and do it in our families. We are given today the model of the Holy Family. And I think one of the things that we have to remember is that this is not a model of a perfect family. I think one of the things that most people, at least in my experience, struggle with is the grief that their family isn't perfect. That every one of us have an idea, subconsciously even, of what a family is supposed to look like. A family is supposed to look like this. And this is how all the relationships are supposed to be. And this is what I envision my kids and my grandkids to be, and family get-togethers, and this, that, and the other thing. And all of these things that we carry within us, this is what family life is supposed to be. And never does our real experience of that meet that image in our heads 100% of the time. And we end up, whether we know it or not, grieving the loss of the idea of the perfect family. That my family isn't what it's supposed to be, it isn't what it should be, it isn't what it could be, and there is a grief then that strikes us. And we might be angry about that, we might be hurt about that, we might get depressed about that. There are lots of ways that people respond when they grieve and when they're hurt and when they're broken. But this idea of a perfect family, I guarantee doesn't exist. I have not yet met one family that is perfect. Now, if yours is that family, please wait after Mass, because I want to meet you and find out what the secret is. Because this is something that I have not yet encountered in real life. And even the image that is placed before us today of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, they are not a perfect family. There are so many things that's strange about this family and about how they were brought together and how this child came into the world and how they ended up living. It is a bizarre situation. It is not a perfect family at all, but it is a holy family. It's a holy family because God was at the center of it. Every one of those members of that family put God first. Joseph listened to the word of God, and he took Mary into his home. Joseph listened to the word of God and took Mary and Jesus to safety when their lives were in danger. Joseph listened to the word of God and brought them back to where they would make their home. Mary listened to the word of God in her confusion and fear about conceiving the Son of God. Mary listened to the word of God in bringing this joy into the world to Elizabeth and then to all of us. And Jesus, of course, himself, the Son of God, not only is God in the middle of this family, but he always is attentive to the will of his Father. I can do nothing, Jesus says, unless I see the Father already doing. That Jesus makes himself obedient, not my will, but yours be done. And he listens constantly to the Father. By putting God at the center of that relationship, their life, though it is not perfect, becomes holy. And that becomes a marker then for us and reminds us what the goal of every family is. The goal of a family, a Christian family, is that each and every person in that family are able to find God, to know him or herself more perfectly, and to respond to God then as God desires. Our job as Christian parents, as Christian children, as brothers and sisters, as husbands and wives, is to get those other members of our family to heaven. My job is to help you know yourself in God and to be able to respond more perfectly to him. That's what makes a family a holy family. A holy family helps each other know who they are and know who God is and how to respond. There is this bizarre notion sometimes, you hear people talk about it, or it's in a movie or whatever, that I have to go away. I have to go be off by myself to find myself. I've got to go whatever, sow my wild oats, go see the world, go do this or that to find myself. That's nonsense. We don't find ourselves in isolation. We lose ourselves in isolation. We become creatures of the world and habits that are not really who we are supposed to be. We find ourselves in relationship. You don't know what you look like until you look into a mirror. You need that reflective presence to show you who you are. The members of our family serve as a mirror. They show us who we are. They show us what our strengths are, and what our blessings are, and what our graces and gifts and talents are. But they also reveal to us what our faults are, what our hurts are, what our addictions are, what our problems are. And when we're open to seeing that reflection, when we're open to realizing where I am graced and where my shadows are, then we can continue to grow in holiness. Because I know more deeply who I am by seeing myself in relationship with other people. And in that, then, I know a little bit more about my relationship with God. And I know how I'm engaging God. And we can help then teach others how to find God and how to love. We learn how to love. We learn how to share. We learn how to forgive in our families. And I think that's even my own vocation story. My parents didn't tell me to be a priest. My parents didn't encourage me, oh, you should think about being a priest, or so on and so forth. But I knew I was called to the priesthood because of my family, because of my mom and dad, because of the love they had for one another. And I saw it authentically and real. Were they perfect? No. Was their relationship perfect? Absolutely not. Were they always having a good time? No. I saw my parents fight. I saw my parents make up. I saw my parents love one another. I saw my parents support one another. And I learned what love looked like as a man. And I learned what that was supposed to be. And I remember as a kid, probably 3rd or 4th grade, thinking, how am I ever going to find a wife as good as my mom? My dad was so lucky. How am I going to find her? That's a lot of pressure for a 3rd grader or a 4th grader. And then as I grew up, I found that woman. I found her in the church. The church is that image of my mother, my spouse, my dad's spouse. I found that woman that I could give myself totally to and build up a family of believers that is completely fulfilling and satisfying. We learn to hear our vocations in a family. We learn to know how to love in a family. Which means the way to holiness in our families, not to perfection, but to holiness, is to hear those words of St. Paul today. Mercy. We have been forgiven by God. We have been shown mercy by God. And so we must in turn show that forgiveness and mercy to one another. The act of healing. Because we're all broken, and because our families are broken, we need lots of healing. And we need to support one another in the journey of healing. And we need to be open to being healed in those families and not resist that. Which is where those hard words today come from. Be submissive. Be subordinate. Be obedient. Be humble. Every one of the members of that family, if they truly love one another, will subordinate their needs to the other. Yes, wives, be submissive to your husbands, but husbands, if you don't do the same thing in return, you can't expect it from your wife. Children, listen to your parents, but parents, you gotta listen to your kids as well, because they will show you what they need. Kids, listen to those parents because they see things you don't. Moms and dads, husbands and wives, look at one another and see your other self. And as we learn to listen and be subordinate to one another and be obedient to one another, we know what holiness is. Because family life is not about being bossy. It's not about being the boss of the family or this, that, or the other thing. I'm the oldest sibling, so I get to boss all my brothers and sisters around. Or I'm the dad, so I get to tell mom what to do all the time. No. A holy family is a family where we are obedient to one another, where we listen to one another, and we learn then who we are. So don't shoot for a perfect family, because you will find yourself disappointed and exceptionally unhappy the rest of your lives. But you can shoot for a holy family. A holy family is possible when we let God be at the center, and when each of us are obedient to God and obedient to one another. Then we have found what a holy family is. Then we have learned to love and to know ourselves